Welcome to the Strategic Advantage. Here, we unpack the secrets of business strategy with consultant, speaker, and regular Harvard Business Review author, Dr. Graham Kenny. This live conversation is brought to you by KMS Education, offering masterclasses that will take you to the next level in strategy design and performance measurement.
Hello and welcome to the Strategic Advantage. Today, Dr. Graham Kenny is addressing the topic of the start of business strategy. Hi, Graham.
Hi, Monique.
Can you tell us, did business strategy start on a particular year?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because a lot of people think business strategy is really, really old, but it's actually not. And a particular book came out in 1965 called Corporate Strategy. I just happen to have a copy here. I don't know how that happened. And the author was Igor Anzov, and that's 1965. And this is the foundations for what we now know as business strategy or strategic planning. And you don't have to take my word for it. The venerable Henry Mintzberg, professor at McGill University, in his book, The Rise and Fall of Strategic Planning, shouted out this particular book as the foundation stone for modern business strategy. So if you do the numbers, it's about 60 years ago.
It's quite young.
It is. And a lot of people think, oh, it must relate to military times. Well, of course, the military did have strategy developed and, codified and so on. But when it comes to frameworks, methods, techniques, this is the beginning. In fact, the subtitle is quite interesting. An analytical approach to business policy for growth and expansion. And in the early days of strategic management, as it's now known, it was called business policy. And it was taught as a capstone subject to undergraduate degrees, and also the capstone subject in what later became MBAs. So that's very interesting. So, there's been a lot of development since that time, but here is the original source.
And so if that's one of the key texts, are there any other books that you'd identify as foundational in business strategy?
Well, for me, there's three. And that's number one, because it started the whole thing. And the second one is a Michael Porter book. Now, Michael Porter's name is synonymous with business strategy and competitive strategy, which is the title of this book. And that book was published in 1980. So we've got a little gap of about 15 years before this one came along. Now, Michael Porter's written a lot of material and several other books. But this was his first, and it really changed the field. So I'd nominate that as number two, and I'm coming up with only three. And the third book is a book that most people have never heard of, called Strategic Management by Edward Freeman. Now, Ed Freeman, I've met Ed Freeman and I've met Michael Porter as well, but Ed Freeman is now Professor of Business Ethics at the University of Virginia. And this is an interesting book for a very simple reason. It says down here, a stakeholder approach. Mm-hmm. And stakeholders became the foundation of my methods over the last, 20 years or so.
And so can you tell me a bit about the different theories and the way it moved from those early foundations 50, 60 years ago?
Great question, actually. This is, if you like, corporate strategy is quite a formal approach to it all. Here's the systematic way to go about developing strategy through an organization, through a series of objective setting and so on. Series of steps on objective setting. So it's quite prescriptive. Michael Porter's approach was about analysing industries, so analysing entry requirements into industries. And he's got a famous model there that called about competitive forces. But what he doesn't talk about, and what Anzov doesn't talk about, is what Freeman brought up, which was about stakeholders. Now, I ignored this book. I actually got it pre-publication, which was, before it came out in 84. I don't know how I got it in 1983, but I did. It was given to me free as a professor in a university. You get these free books, and I ignored it for at least, I suppose, 7 years. Didn't take much notice of it. But what I did find out later was it's really the way of thinking about organisations through a stakeholder lens is the only way to do it, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, so when did you get involved? When did you start developing methods in strategy?
Well, that'd be 1990. And I say 1990, not that I wasn't involved before, because I was teaching strategic management in universities, but really I was teaching from textbooks. So you really just took a standard text and then went through that with a series of exercises or whatever. But after I left the academic field, I got the wonderful opportunity to be a general manager of a company that made trusses and frames for houses. And why that was a great opportunity was it was a turnaround situation. And I started to think about what works and what doesn't work. And it wasn't until we sold that business, and then I started running public programs around 1990, that I realized in order to work with managers and executive teams, I needed something extra. It wasn't in those 3 books. It had to be developed. And that's when I wrote my own material from then on.
You wrote a couple of books on the subject.
I've written 5, but the first one came out in 2001. It was called Strategic Factors. And so it was pulling together really my experience in trying to facilitate strategic planning exercises with executives, with my academic background. So I had all the literature sitting on one side, practical problems on the other, and then I tried to work out a method, which we commonly call a framework, for tackling these things.
Okay. And now you're a regular contributor with the Harvard Business Review. When did you start writing for them?
I think it was 2014 when I got my lucky break. I think the first article was 5 questions to find your key stakeholders. And so I've been writing for them for the last seven years, I guess.
Okay. And so you've got that perspective of real industry as well as academic sort of ties, and then also writing and communicating it to the public through your journalism. Where do you see the discipline going from here?
Look, I think a lot of this framework development has been done, and that's my opinion. Others would have a different view. So in other words, I'm fairly settled personally in where I've landed in terms of designing strategies, developing objectives, analysing industries, executing strategic plans. So I've done, as I said before, a lot of reading and development over a period of time. So I think the next thing will be technology. And I think artificial intelligence promises a lot in the field of strategy execution. Not so much in strategy design, because that's a lot to do with individuals talking to customers and clients. But I think in terms of executing where you want to go, getting that down through an organization and making sure it's implemented effectively and consistently, I think artificial intelligence is the next big step.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. It sounds really exciting. We'll see you next time on The Strategic Advantage.
Thanks very much, Monique. Thank you for your questions. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on The Strategic Advantage. If you've enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. See you next time.